Hello, all my data people. Alright, so I'm sure you guys have been asked to have an Excel file and do some analysis on it before and make it into some pretty analysis with some insightful value and trends that you can see over time to show your bosses how pretty and smart you are. It's pretty hard to do that in Excel, especially when you have some files that are related with data, but the files can only be exported separately. So if you have some data systems where you've got some data and it's all related to each other within the system, it can't do the custom analysis you want to do. So when you export that data, you're at a loss. You've got three separate files that are unrelated, and you've got to try to do a bunch of Excel work to get them all related. I'm going to tell you how Power BI is the answer and how you can solve all of that with Power BI very quickly. Create a report in an hour or so that will get you to look like something like this. Very quickly, very easily, everything will be filterable, everything will slice and dice everything else, nice and easy, all within an hour of picking up the software. All right, let's get into it. So going back to our data, so let's say we've got our data, right? The dummy data I've got for this example is we're going to be using transactional, so financial data essentially is what we're going to be working with. So we've got a table full of individuals, we've got some accounts that each of those individuals have, and then each of those accounts have transactions. So that's essentially our data. And what we're going to want to do on this is we're going to bring this into Power BI and just do some simple functions within Power BI so we can get all of our metrics and data onto a page and reportable. So to start out, let's go ahead and open up Power BI Desktop. If you've ever been here before, you know the first place that we're going to want to go to is Transform Data. And if you've not been here before, this Transform Data button is going to get you into where you can grab all of your data sources and kind of build all of your connections, do all of the ETL stuff, all of the data source connection stuff. So let's go ahead. We're going to go to Get a New Source. So on this little button up here in the Home tab, we're going to click on the drop down, go to More. And within this page, you'll have all of the built-in connectors that Power BI has, right? So there are a whole bunch of Power BI connectors that are built in. So you can take advantage of a whole bunch of connectors. We've got CSV files with our data though. So we'll just select that text CSV. And then we will go into our data, connect to it, and then it'll bring up a little preview screen. Most of the times you can just push OK here. And let's go ahead and grab our other files. Account, individuals, and one more for their transactions. Alrighty, so now we've got all of our data. So all of our data is already loaded into our model, right? Like that. It's that easy in Power BI, right? So now we're connected to our data, and we've got all of the data that is in here in our Power BI model. Now to start reporting on this in our data model, we just have to push the Close and Apply button. That will start loading our data into our model. And voila, just like that. Now our data is in there. So it's just that quick and easy. And so now if you want to view it in a format that you're familiar with, so if you're coming from an Excel background, this second tab over here, this Data View tab on Power BI Desktop, is going to display all of your data in essentially a kind of table Excel format that a lot of people are used to. So it's going to give you that exact same copy of your data that is right here in the exact same way. Nice and easy way to kind of validate, check through your data. Usually the first place you go to once you load in some new data is the model view. So what this is where you build those relationships. Those relationships that we were talking about at the beginning with accounts are tied to individuals and transactions are tied to accounts. All of that stuff is done through here, this relationship model view tab. So on this tab, what you're going to want to do is just essentially drag and drop what those columns are related. So it's very simple. It's literally just drag and drop the IDs, indices, whatever's related between the tables, drag and drop those to each other, and then your relationship will be built, and then I'll get into how we can build some measures and calculations on top of that. All right, so let's get into it. So taking the ID on the individual, we're going to want to relate that to the individual ID on the account table. So again, you'll just drag that ID column from the individual table and drop it onto the individual ID on the accounts table. It is that simple. So just drag and drop like that. Once we get that created, we can then again do the same thing for transactions. We will go with the account ID and move that over to, drag and drop that over to the account ID on the transactions table. So now you can see that these three arrows have been, or these two arrows have been created that are indicative of our relationships. So these are the relationships that our model now has. So our model now has our individuals that will filter our accounts, and then our accounts will now filter our transactions. So let's just go ahead and do some quick, simple measures here to show you guys how those things are related. And before we do any measures, one of the best practices that I do whenever I create a new model on Power BI is always create some measure groups. So just like over here, how these tables are within their own kind of little group, how you can organize them. If you create this, if you click on this Enter Data button, enter in just some name. I usually go with this for my first one. And then it'll create another little table. So we've created a dummy table essentially with just one blank column on there. Now, if we go to add a measure, we can just have that be a placeholder for now so we don't need to do anything special with it. And then you see this icon is a bit different than the icons here, right? So this icon indicates that this is a measure. If we want to delete, or if we want to create a measure group, we can delete that column that we created from our insert, or from our enter data button, and then now we've got a measure group. So now this data set, or this little data function, data group, contains only measures. So that's why it's got this little measure icon now. So now you can easily distinguish, okay, here are tables, then here are measures. All right, let's go ahead and just sum up the number of accounts. So let's go ahead and count the account table. So count the rows on the account table, and then we'll link that to the individuals to show how many accounts each individual has. So let's just do a simple count rows on the account table, and it is that easy. After we do that, let's go ahead and drop on our individuals. Let's drop in the account type so you can see what type of account these individuals have. So already we can see how those relationships are already active, right? So already within our data set, if we go back to our Excel file and we track back what's happening, so this individual Aaron Aguilar, if we search in our individuals for that name, Aaron, and then we get their ID, so whatever their ID would be, and then we search for that individual ID, we would then see that on that account file, all of these accounts would be listed on that account file for Aaron Aguilar, right? We've just created that relationship by making these arrows. So instead of having to do some crazy VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and then looking up off the pivot tables and some Excel functions to reference other tabs and other files and making this whole mess in Excel, just a couple of simple arrows, boom, boom, and now you've got your relationships. And so now what you can do is then drop in that measure, and then voila. So now Aaron Aguilar has two accounts of the account type savings on the within our data. So on that account table, he's got two accounts savings. And then just to validate that real quick, we can throw on the individual ID. So you can just go and match that real quickly. So 27116. If we hop over to here on our account table, let's get this opened up so we can see it. All right, and who is that? 27116. And so here are his 6 accounts. Here are those 2 savings accounts, and then if we put those retirement, or if we put the descriptions on there, then we would see that they are both were retirement accounts. So, right, so there are those, there's that ID, there's the savings accounts, and he's got 2 of them. And then so those other 4 accounts would be these other 4 accounts that are in here. Right, so again, quick and easy how you can kind of create those relationships off of some crazy exports out of a system that won't allow you to export various related items together and only can export things separately. Quick way to kind of just combine them up, relate them together real quick, and boom, there's your count on how many accounts each person has. And then so let's just keep chasing this kind of quick little measures real quick, see how many measures we can get added on here, and make this model a little bit more in depth with a nice little fancy report in a quick amount of time. So another quick function or measure that some financial data you might need pretty frequently is some transaction counts, so count of transactions. So essentially the same thing as the individuals, or as the account table, but instead of counting on the account table, now you're going to be counting the rows in the transaction table. And so again, you put that on there. There you can see that Aaron's checking account has had 65 transactions on it. That's right. You can see those checking accounts have more transactions versus any of the other account types. So kind of what you would expect. And another quick one, let's just go with the individuals. So the number of individuals. And again, just a simple count rows function. And this one is going to be all 1 across the board since each individual is only 1. But this total down here doesn't mean, so with Power BI, the way that you have to look at Power BI's report is the context of the report. So this context is on the account level. So we have an account level context within this table. So when we go to the individual, although Aaron Aguilar shows 1 7 times for each of those accounts, he's only counted in the total 1 time because he's 1 individual. But when we have the context over an account type, again, he is 1 individual that owns that account. So over the accounts, there is 1 individual. Now let's get into using some dates. So we've got some quick little functions here, right? So quick and easy way to just do some quick counts, throw some counts onto a table, and now your data is related. Wonderful. Now let's start doing some more complicated stuff. Let's throw some date context onto here. And so the date table that I will use is just a very generic Power BI date table that I've come across. It is very in-depth and has pretty much everything you will need for a date table. So the way that you're going to want to add this date table is you're going to go to New Sources in Power Query. So again, open Power Query, click on that Transform Data button. You will go to New Source, and this time we're going to do a blank query. So open up a blank query, and once you've got that query selected, go into the Advanced Editor. You're going to select everything in there, and then I'll include this date table code as a little, I'll include some link to it in the description of the video. But then you'll just paste in the code right into the blank query, and then press OK. And once you press OK, you'll kind of get this little screen right here. So this is intended. I just like to make my stuff, make sure it's labeled and organized properly, so I just name it the date table real quick. And let's go ahead and do our date range. So I think the data starts in 2019 or something. Let's just go 2018 just in case. End data, I'm not sure when it ends. Let's go to the end of 2023. And so what these parameters are, what we're doing is we're essentially entering in the parameters of how our date table will be created. So we're entering in the start and end date of the date table that we're going to create when we press invoke. So our date table range is going to be the earliest date on our date table is going to be this start date, and then the latest date is going to be that end date. And then some great things about this table, the reason why I use this date table across all of my models I always build, is because it's got these options in here. So what these options do is you can set a specific fiscal year. So there's a fiscal year column within fields within this date table. So if you specify a fiscal year of, let's say, 6, what that means is that's going to have your fiscal year start in June. So every year there's going to be a year field on your date table, which will be 2018, And there will also be a fiscal year, which would be 2018, but it starts 6/1 as opposed to 1/1, and then it goes to 5/30/2019, right? So that's a great benefit of this date table. Another thing, same kind of thing with the fiscal year, you can also identify when you want to start your week. So do you want to start it on a 1? Do you want to start it on a Tuesday, on a Monday, on a Wednesday? You can establish when your week starts. And you can also establish when holidays are. So if you're getting really in depth into your reporting and you need to have daily reports be exactly accurate by the number of days that are available in the workday, then you can also include a holiday list that will exclude those holidays that are work days. So there's another filter on the date table where you can exclude certain statuses of a day, like a work day or a holiday, things like that, and that's just another option. And all right, so let's go ahead and just invoke this date table. Again, what that's going to do is just give you those dates between that starting date and that ending date. And once that is loaded up, this is our date table, date function, and date table. All right, and let's again go ahead and close and apply. Wonderful. And let's go back to that relationship tab, so that model view. Let's open up all these relationships again. All right, so now what we're going to want to do with our dates is within this data, I'm not sure if you noticed it, but you can see that there are a bunch of different date fields that we have in here, right? So we've got the account open date, we've got the account close date, we've got the individual, the date that they left, we've got the individual, the date that they started, we've got transaction dates. So we've got a whole bunch of dates here, right? And within a Power BI model, we can only work with one active date relationship within a certain context, right? So each table, I can't have, if I try to drag this date column, so if I try to create a date relationship between this individual relationship date, start date, and then the individual date that they left, this one you can see gets the dotted lines, right? So this dotted line means that it's an inactive relationship. So whenever we're filtering by a date, this relationship is not active, but this one is. So if we filter by the date table, we would only get individuals with the relationship start date between the date we filtered by. But instead, what I want to do here with my dates is instead of having the individual be my default date relationship, I'm going to have my transactions be my default date relationship. And so the reason why I do that is because you can see here how I've got it kind of built like a waterfall, right? So each of these arrows are going down towards the bottom table. So the reason for that is because the Power BI model will filter top to bottom when we have our relationship set up this way. So individuals will filter accounts. Accounts will not filter individuals. Individuals will filter accounts, which also filter transactions. So individuals filter to transactions, again, because those arrows are downwards. But because the arrows don't go upwards, we can't do the same thing. So transactions do not filter individuals. So same kind of thing with the dates and the date concept. We can't have an active date relationship. So if I add this relationship anew, let me delete these two date relationships. So if we add this date relationship down here over to the transaction date, you can see that when it gets added as an active relationship. So that means that we can add a filter, we can add a date filter to this model. There's nothing preventing it or nothing that's getting in the way from creating that active date relationship. Then when we add another date relationship to our account table, you can see that it gets added with an inactive relationship. And the reason for that is because of that filtering, right? So we can't filter this above table, so we can't filter this account table by the date because this transaction table is also filtered by a date. So if this relationship is active, so if we have this relationship active by the date table, it would filter the items underneath it by that same date relationship, right? So we can't have that table have a date relationship as well as the table underneath it have a date relationship. We can only have one date relationship between the model. However, the way that we can work around those things is that we can create these relationships. So if whatever date relationship you might fathom having in your model, create it. Create an inactive relationship. It doesn't do anything. It's just there. It's not going to mess up any of your filtering. It's just an inactive relationship that you might be able to call on in the future if you find yourself needing it. So now, when we collapse all of our tables, now the way that we can see our relationships is we've got 5 new relationships added, 4 new inactive ones onto all of our dates on our individual and account table, and then 1 active one onto our transaction table. So whenever we filter this date table, we will have a active filtering by our transactions. So let's go ahead and see what that means. So on our date table, search for year here. Let's actually first mark this as a date table. Go ahead and mark it as a date table. Select the date column. Wonderful. All right, so now let's select a slicer visual. Let's go ahead and do this again. Select a slicer visual. Let's make this smaller and throw in the year. I don't want it to be that one. Go to slicer settings. Let's do a drop down. Wonderful. All right, let's go 2021. No data in 2021? Okay, no data in 2021. Okay, so we got data in 2020 and 2021 is when our data is. So let's filter our year down to 2020 and 2021 so I don't get confused here. 2020, 2021. Okay, wonderful. Now here are 2 years. So when we have no year selected, we can see that all of our data is still here. So this looks the exact same as it did when we initially started. Right, so we've got our accounts, our individuals, all filtered, all with no filter on there essentially. We've got that active date relationship on our transaction table now. So when I filter this date table, only my transactions will change. Because again, that transaction table does not go upward to filter our accounts. We're just filtering transactions by dates. However, let's say we also wanted to see how many accounts were opened within the same time frame. The way that you do something like that is, let's go ahead and create a new measure group here. I'm going to do something a little more complicated, so let's go with something else to organize it. Let's go account count by date added. And so now what we're going to do is instead of taking account rows and then just taking account rows on that full table, we're going to do a calculate on that base measure. So we're going to use that base measure that we first created, that account count measure, and then we're just going to build on top of it. So we're just going to build a new measure using that base measure. So all of that syntax within its base measure is now being calculated. And then we're just going to build on top of it with new syntax. So we're going to calculate that account count function. And then after this comma, you can see what the syntax is expecting. So now we're going to filter this calculation expression by whatever we want to filter it by. Right? And so we want to filter it by a use relationship. So we're going to add the function use relationship. And if you hover over this, you can see what this does. So this is going to specify an existing relationship to be used in the evaluation of the expression. So it's going to change the relationship that is evaluating this expression. The relationship is defined by naming as arguments the 2 columns that serve as endpoints. So we'll go ahead and use relationship. We will call our first side of the relationship the date table. And then we'll call the other side of the relationship, which is going to be our open date for accounts. So again, we've just got, let me show you the syntax. So we've got the date is our column 1, and then our other date is our column 2. So that is the 2 sides of our inactive relationship that we're now activating. So going back to the model, this is that relationship that we've activated now. So we're taking account on this table, and then we're using our date filter relationship from the date table onto our accounts and activating it. So now, let me delete this. So when we go here, we can see that in 2020, 9,700 accounts were opened. So we had 40,000 transactions and 90,000 accounts opened, not the 27,500 that are within the data set. So there are a total 27,500 in the whole data set. But then when we filter for 2020, we're only at 10K that have been opened within that year. And then if we go to the next year, they're the next ones, right? So again, you can see that this number doesn't change. We've still got that account count staying still because there's no relationship by our date on there. But now I've activated it, so now we're filtering by the number of transactions that were opened, or the number of accounts that were opened within the year we're filtering for. Nice and easy. So again, just one of those massive benefits of Power BI over just the Excel work, just how crazy Excel can get and how quickly it can get, which is to refer and relate all of these different things and index match properly and look up right and all of that craziness is just so much easier with Power BI, which is creating these arrows and making sure your model's right. And then it's just a simple couple functions to throw on the page and voila, you got your beautiful visuals, right? All right, so let's do a couple more simple little functions here just to show you the power of some of these quick little DAX functions that we can do here. So another one I'm going to do is let's go with a time series. All right, so let's do this. Let's go 2020. Alrighty. So now we've got, again, we're using our relationships that have a date relationship active on them, or our measures that have a date relationship active on them, right? So now we've got our two measures here with a date relationship. What we're going to want to do here is I'm going to show you how we can easily move one of these previous month's numbers up to the current month to essentially do some month-over-month growth rate. So just how to do a quick growth rate, monthly growth rate, and see how you can compare 1 month to the previous month, 1 year to the previous month, any kind of time comparison like that. Super, super easy. So again, let me go ahead and create a new one. Let's go time intelligence. And let's go month over month. Actually, no, let's go count of transaction last month. So again, we're going to take a calculate statement, and we're going to calculate on that base transaction. But this time, we're going to be in the filter statement. So again, in the filter condition, after that comma, we're going to go with a date add. And we're going to add dates to our date table, since again, that's our active relationship. So when we've got that active relationship onto our transactions, we're adding dates to that transaction date. And we're going to go after this comma, what we're specifying here in this date add function is a number of intervals we're adding to our expression. So we're going to be adding -1 month because we're going last month, and then we're going to specify the interval going with month. Close it out. Let's go ahead and delete you. And let's put you onto here. And then real quick, let's just do the same thing with the account since we've got it there. What did I name this? Count by date added, count of accounts opened last month. That's why I was getting confused. All right, so now when we throw this onto the page, you can see that everything looks wrong, right? We're not getting the stuff in the last month, but what actually happened is our date table doesn't yet have the correct filtering that we've specified. So we've used this month and year column, but that's not the date column. So this month and year column on our date table doesn't yet know how to be sorted. So the way we fix that is let's go over to our data view, go into our date table, look for our column that we are using. We are using the month and year column, and select that column. And then once we have the column selected, we're going to go up in the top pane and select the sort by column. And so on this date table, the way that we're going to want to sort any of these month and or quarter and or day or week and years are these month in year items. So this quarter in or this quarter in year, these are how you're going to want to sort these ones. So if you click on that column month and year, we're going to want to sort it by month in N year. So go ahead and click on the column, sort by column, and then go through and scroll through that column and find it. So now once you've got it, if you open it up again, you will see that it's highlighted to show that that is the column that it's sorting by. Right, so when you open it up again, there you go. So now we know that it is sorting properly. So when we hop back over here, now we can see that, voila, now our stuff is calculating properly. So we're now looking at the previous month going back 1 month. So each of our transactions, so here's our current month, February, we had 168 transactions. We want to compare that to how many we made last month. Well, there you go. We just need to move that same number up into the same context, and now we can compare these two numbers. Same thing with the account added. So now if we want to do that growth rate, now I can quickly just compare these two numbers. Let's do month-over-month transaction. Let's go count of transactions. And so now there's just a simple growth rate calculation, count of transactions minus count of transactions last month divided by, let's just do a divided function here to keep it nice and clean. Let's go divide count of that minus count of that divided by count of transactions last month. Let's throw you onto the table, make you a percentage, and voila, there we go. So now we can see that we are counting our transactions month over month. So we are now comparing these two numbers and getting a growth rate to identify how much our transactions increased month over month. And we can do the same thing with the accounts if we wanted to. And so all of this is leading up to essentially just a couple more measures, and we can get to a report that looks like this, right? So within a quick hour or so of knowing how to use the platform, knowing how to use the software, you can get to a report that just has all of this nice and clean on a report. Not very much knowledge, no coding knowledge needed, no Power BI knowledge really needed, anything in depth. Just have an Excel background, know how to make some Excel functions, and this is what you can do. Everything within these reports will be clickable, filterable. This will completely change how you do any of your data work. Your day-to-day will completely be transformed. Learn Power BI, I promise you. So that is what I've got for you. Let me know if you've got any questions, any ideas for any other suggestions on some topics to cover, some help that you guys might need on any specific situations you guys are struggling with Power BI. Was this helpful? Is this useless? Did you guys even watch to the end? Let me know in the comments. Never done this before, first time doing it. Thanks for watching. Bye.